Hey everyone, my name is Shanice and welcome back to my channel. As of late, I have been in a pretty productive writing mood. It doesn't happen very often, but thankfully I'm in one right now. And so the big project that I am starting to work on is what I hope to be a novel, perhaps a series of novels. I'm not yet sure, but it is a longer form fiction. It is in the very beginning stages. I'm still collecting research, I'm still finding some material for inspiration, which is what this video is about. But generally speaking, what my future novel will be about is an intergenerational tale, sort of semi-autobiographical, set in the Dominican Republic and following 5 generations of women based on the women that I've known and some that I haven't known in my own family. Definitely in terms of the books that I will be using as inspiration are, historical books, textbooks, other forms of autofiction, other Latin American novels, books that deal with multi-generational tales and set in different time periods and that in some way grapple with post-colonial identity and stuff like that. And so in the process of finding these kinds of books, I have definitely discovered some fantastic material, just some titles that I haven't really mentioned on this channel. Some I have, and I thought it would be useful to make a series of videos where in each video I talk about a group of the books that I will be reading and studying from for this novel project that I'm working on. And so for today's video, part 1, I suppose, I will be mentioning some of the books, some of the fiction books that I will be reading that deal with mainly multiculturalism, multi-generational stories, and mother-daughter relationships, and in some way are told from the perspective of first-generation immigrants, first-generation citizens of whatever country it is that the novel takes place in. And I would absolutely love more books like this, so if you have read another book that I haven't mentioned today that deals with these topics, please comment down below. I definitely don't want the same old authors and voices that are always recommended, so the more obscure the better. I am still in the process of finding books, so this list that I'm including here is definitely not the final one. It's ever growing. Just whenever I come across a new book, it just gets added onto the list. So without further ado, this is part 1 of the books that I will be using as an influence, as inspiration for my novel project. The first book that I'll mention is called Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi, and it was published in 2019. What I know about this is that it is told in a very caustic, witty voice. It's very acerbic, it's very raw and honest and unflinching. It tells the story of a now adult Antara and her very strained relationship with her mom, Tara. And I believe that it is set in India and just follows all the tumult between these two women. I imagine that it's going to be kind of a hard story to digest just because of how brutally honest it is. Just the first sentence alone, which I will look down to read, the first sentence of the book is, "I would be lying if I said my mother's misery has never given me pleasure." So that alone just lets me know how intense this book is going to be, and I have seen a lot of mixed reviews about this. Some find it too cruel, some find it kind of boring, some are really wowed by that honesty, so I don't know. I'm someone who loves reading about flawed characters. I especially love reading about mother-daughter relationships and ones that aren't perfect, where both the mother and the daughter are prone to contradictions and mistakes, and you're never rooting for one more than the other. They're just both kind of equally human. So those are my favorite characters to read about. So I imagine that this book is maybe going to be a favorite, but I really don't know. But that is definitely one on my list. The next book on my list is called Breath, Eyes, Memory, written by Edwidge Danticat and published in 1998. I'm actually going to read the summary of this book because before researching for this novel, I had never heard of this book at all. I have heard of the author. I've already read one of her books, The Farming of Bones. As someone who's going to be writing about the Dominican Republic, I think it's impossible to not mention Haiti, especially because I will be focusing a lot on racial identity and racial politics, so Haiti just has to be mentioned 100%. So I know Edwidge Danticat is beloved as a Haitian writer. She's like a national figure, so I definitely knew I wanted to read one of her books, but like I said, I had never heard of this one. So, what it's about. At the age of 12, Sophie is sent from her impoverished village in Haiti to New York to be reunited with a mother she barely remembers. There she discovers secrets that no child should ever know, and a legacy of shame that can be healed only when she returns to Haiti, to the women who first reared her. What ensues is a passionate journey through a landscape charged with the supernatural and scarred by political violence, in a novel that bears witness to the traditions, suffering, and wisdom of an entire people. So I think this absolutely has those historical elements that are going to be important for my own work. It has that mother-daughter relationship, but it also seems like it has generations of women and their stories and how their path has shaped the present. So yeah, this sounds phenomenal, and I cannot wait to read more Edwidge Danticat. Next up is a book called The Book of Mother. It was originally written in French by Violaine Huisman, and it was translated by Leslie Camhi. And so this book is in the style of autofiction, which honestly is one of my favorite things. I know it's very trendy now, but I generally love it. And it tells the story of a woman named Catherine, who was also just referred to as Mom. And Catherine is very lively, very energetic. She is the life of every room, of every party. She just attracts attention. She's one of those people who is very social and just exudes a warm, social, amiable energy. But after a very rough patch in her life, she becomes hospitalized, and then once she's released, she has to be taken care of by her two daughters, Violaine and Violaine's sister, and it is during her recovery that the two daughters start learning more about who their mother really is. They start breaking apart that sort of perfect facade that she's had this whole time. And the back of the book describes the tension in the house when the mother is in recovery and she's being cared for by the two daughters as an emotional landmine. So from what I know, it is going to deal with a lot of childhood trauma and just the two daughters investigating just who their mother really was and is. And I thought that would fit perfectly in my novel because that's essentially what I would be doing in researching some of the female characters in the book, but also in my own family. And I think it prioritizes memory too, which is obviously going to be very important for my own book, and the dangers of like holding on to too much memory and not living in the present. So yeah, this sounds phenomenal, and I've been wanting to read it since the International Booker long list was announced, but I haven't gotten around to that yet. Don't know when I'm going to get to this book, but it's definitely going to be one of the books that I will be reading as inspiration. I've already planned out what my Big Book Challenge reading list for 2023 is going to be, so I already know when I am going to be reading this next book. And I'm so excited for it because this absolutely is sort of the model for what I'm going for in terms of tracing a family's entire genealogy. And so that book is Roots by Alex Haley, which was published in 1976. It's pretty well known what this book is about, but basically from the beginning you start off with Kunta Kinte, who is an African slave sold into slavery and then brought to North America, and it follows the generations of his descendants, starting with him, of course, and ending with the author Alex Haley, because this book is semi-autobiographical. It is a massive book. It is large in scope. It seems very daunting to me. It's obviously going to be very harrowing to read, but just the premise is pretty much what I want to do in my own novel, but just not as big a scope and with not as many characters. I'm definitely just going to focus on 5 women, but you're definitely going to see how people self-identify and how identity as a concept changes with a new generation, and how certain beliefs about one's identity are rooted in a sort of post-colonial conditioning, and how complex and nuanced that can be, especially in a place like the Dominican Republic. And so Roots is sort of the goal. Again, not going to be, my own work is not going to be as complex and vast in timeline as Roots, but hopefully I want to be getting at some of these themes that Alex Haley work through in his own book. Though, of course, probably not as good because I am not Alex Haley. But yeah, I cannot wait to get to this. This is, I imagine, going to be very impactful for me. Books that deal with finding your roots, tracing your roots, just speak to me so much. So yeah, Roots by Alex Haley will be happening in 2023. The next book on my list is also one of those that is obviously something that I'm going to have to read, not just for this project, but in life, because it's a classic and I don't know, I've never gotten around to it. And the book that it was influenced by is one of my favorites of all time. So the book on my list is The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende, and it was published in 1982. It is a multi-generational saga told through 4 generations of the Trueba family. What I know is that it is obviously influenced by 100 Years of Solitude. It talks about post-colonialism, the political upheaval in Chile, and features some magical realism. It is semi-autobiographical. Allende started writing this book after learning that her 100-year-old grandfather was about to die. And for me, one of the things I want to be looking for when I'm reading this is how she links the history of a nation with the history of this one family and how their parallel histories intertwine and work together. And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking maybe I should just include Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie into here too, because it's sort of like that too. Midnight's Children was published in 1981, and the protagonist is Salim. From what I know, Salman Rushdie links Salim's personal life and the fact that he was born at midnight with the history of India. So from the transition for India from British colonial rule to independence to partition, and sort of Salim's birth parallels in a way India's birth, and Salim connects with other people who were also born at the same time as him. I know it's magical realist, again, another one of these post-colonial political tales, which is just, it's what I love, it's what I crave. And I've had this book for forever. And I hate to think that now is the time to read Salman Rushdie just because of the horrible incident that happened to him recently. But I suppose, yeah, it sort of is a push for me to just pick his book up now rather than later, because I guess you never know what could happen to someone. But yeah, I've heard fantastic things about this, and certainly now is the time to read Salman Rushdie if ever there was a time. Okay, the next book is yet another one that I have wanted to read for quite some time. It's called Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeline Tien. This one I am going to read the summary. It's quite long, but I think it does the book justice better than my trash summaries usually do. So the summary is as follows. Master storyteller Madeline Tien takes us inside an extended family in China, showing us the lives of 2 successive generations, those who lived through Mao's Cultural Revolution and their children, who became the students protesting in Tiananmen Square. At the center of this epic story are the 2 young women, Marie and Ai Ming. Through their relationship, Marie strives to piece together the tale of her fractured family in present-day Vancouver, seeking answers in the fragile layers of their collective story. Her quest will unveil how Kai, her enigmatic father, a talented pianist, and Ai Ming's father, the shy and brilliant composer Sparrow, along with the violin prodigy Zuli, were forced to reimagine their artistic and private selves during China's political campaigns, and how their fates reverberate through the years with lasting consequences. Really long summary, but you basically get the essence. Multi-generational, yes. Immigrant families, first-generation immigrants, yes. In this case, it's not necessarily mother-daughter, but daughter-father, father-daughter. There's a political backdrop. It seems to be touching on racial identity, so all of these check my boxes. And from what I've heard, this is incredibly musical, incredibly lyrical, which also is something that I love. And I also like that the first-generation immigrant children are Canadian, or they're living in Canada. It's not a US story, because I know a lot of immigrant stories kind of center the United States, where immigrants exist all over the world in all countries. So yeah, this just seems like it's going to be fantastic. The next book is called The Namesake by Goddess Jhumpa Lahiri. It was published in 2004. I've actually seen the movie of this, which was okay, but it was still interesting enough to make me want to read the book. So it follows a few generations in the Ganguly family who are originally from Calcutta in India. And so it shows their immigration to the United States and how the American-born children struggle with feeling like they are part of either the American culture or the Indian culture, feeling not enough of either. And so one of those children is Gogol. He is named after the writer, and because he has this non-Indian name, and he already, because of his race, is made to feel like he's not American enough, now he's even more confused because he has a Russian name, or really, I think Gogol is Ukrainian born. So, but either way, he has a Slavic name that's not maybe ethnically tied to his own roots, which complicates how he sees himself. So identity is a main focus here. It shows the struggles of new immigrants in a new country. It shows the prejudice that they face, the financial struggles, but also their successes, and the fun and good times that they have together. It's not just a book about tragedy. And because it's Jhumpa Lahiri, I have all the faith in the world that this is just going to be exquisitely written, exquisitely told. It's going to be much more nuanced than the summaries, and I'm sure the movie made it out to be. So yeah, cannot wait for this one. The last book that I'm going to talk about in this video is not 100% loved. I have seen and heard some mixed reviews, some not so great reviews. I remember Sunbeam's Jess, she picked White Teeth for one of her monthly book clubs and she DNF'd it, so I don't know how I'm going to feel about this one, but it is White Teeth by Zadie Smith, published in 2000. It is a tale of multiculturalism in London and immigrants from the British Commonwealth living in England, and it's told through the two main perspectives of Samad Iqbal, who is Bangladeshi, and Archie Jones, who is an Englishman. Honestly, I don't know anything else about this book, surprisingly, because this is, of course, Zadie Smith's first book ever published at some ridiculous age, like 23 or 21 or something. Like, she had just graduated her undergrad, which again is ridiculous. And even with all the talk and discussion and the praise that it's gotten, I still don't know basically anything about it other than what I just told you. So I sort of want to go into it pretty blind. It seems like the characters here are younger than the characters in the other books that I've mentioned, which is important because one of the people that I am going to be writing about is in her 20s. The contemporary modern perspective is definitely needed in some of the inspirational books that I'm going to be using. I am crossing my fingers that I like White Teeth. The only other Zadie Smith book that I've read was Swing Time, which I didn't absolutely love, but you know, I could see from even that book that Zadie Smith is quite an expert writer. She's very gifted, and I'm hoping that White Teeth, being her first novel, isn't such a detractor. Like, I hope that all of that great writing was also featured in that first book and it's not something that just developed over time, you know? And so for now, that is the first chunk of books that I hope to read as inspiration for my novel project. More books are on the way. The next part, maybe I'll focus solely on autofiction, even though a lot of today's books were definitely autobiographical too. But yeah, I think organizing it this way will be just good for me to mentally unblock and mentally organize what I'm going to do, because this is a very, you know, ambitious project that I'm doing. And so the less cluttered the information feels, the better I feel I'm gonna do. So yeah, I hope you guys like this video. I know it's very random, but you know, another excuse just to talk about either books that I haven't talked about before on this channel or just good books in general. So yes, thank you so much for watching again, like always, and like and subscribe and comment. Thank you so much to the subscribers who have joined me along the way so far. And yeah, I will see you all next time. Bye.